Have you ever felt like everything you touch is falling apart? Like you're drowning even though you're standing still? Like your chest is so tight, you've forgotten what it feels like to take a full breath. This is the story of a man who had mastered the art of breathing for 20 years, yet forgot how to breathe when his life caught fire. His name was Stefan, and he was about to learn that the answer to overwhelming chaos isn't doing more, thinking faster, or trying harder. Sometimes, survival comes down to something so simple, we overlook it completely: the rhythm of a single breath. Stefan was 38 years old when his world began to shatter, though the cracks had been forming for years. He was a master glassblower, third generation, carrying on a family craft that had survived wars, economic collapses, and the relentless march of modernization. His hands knew the language of molten glass the way poets know words. For 2 decades, he had transformed fire and sand into beauty, creating pieces that people traveled across the country to purchase. His workshop, tucked in the old quarter of the city, smelled perpetually of smoke and possibility. But lately, it smelled more like desperation. The numbers were brutal and simple: 3 months behind on rent. Medical bills stacked on his desk like a tower of broken promises. His daughter Elena, 9 years old and the center of his universe, had been diagnosed with a chronic illness 2 years earlier. The treatments were expensive, endless, and absolutely necessary. His wife had left 18 months ago, unable to bear the financial pressure, and Stefan's increasing inability to be present for anything except worry. He didn't blame her. He barely recognized himself anymore. Every morning, Stefan woke at 4 a.m., his heart already racing before his eyes opened. His mind would immediately flood with calculations: rent due dates, supplier invoices, Elena's next specialist appointment, the cost of materials. He would lie there in the pre-dawn darkness, his chest tight, his breath shallow and rapid, running through scenarios and contingencies, until the anxiety became so unbearable he had to get up and do something, anything, to outrun the feeling. Except you can't outrun your own mind, and Stefan was learning that lesson the hardest way possible. By the time he reached his workshop each morning, his hands were already trembling. This was a problem because glass blowing demands steady hands. More than that, it demands controlled breath. Glass doesn't care about your problems. It responds only to temperature and timing and the steady, measured exhale that shapes molten material into form. Stefan knew this. His grandfather had drilled it into him as a boy. The glass is honest, Stefan. It will show you exactly what's in your heart. If you're steady, it will be steady. If you're chaos, it will shatter. These days, Stefan shattered a lot of glass. Then came the offer that felt like salvation, but would nearly destroy him. A prestigious gallery in the capital reached out with a commission: 12 custom glass sculptures for a major exhibition. The theme was transformation, rebirth, beauty emerging from fire. The payment was substantial, enough to cover 6 months of workshop rent and a significant portion of Eleanor's treatment costs. The timeline was tight but manageable for a master craftsman working at full capacity.
2 weeks, 12 pieces.
His entire future balanced on molten glass and steady hands. Stefan accepted immediately, desperately, without considering that he hadn't been working at full capacity for months. He hadn't been working at any real capacity at all. But desperation has a way of making impossible things seem merely difficult. He convinced himself that this was the breakthrough he needed, that the pressure would focus him, that somehow he would find a way. He had to find a way. There was no alternative. 3 days into the commission, reality arrived with the force of a sledgehammer. Stefan was working on the first piece, a delicate spiral that required precise breath control to maintain the thin walls of glass. Elena's school called. She was feeling dizzy, disoriented. Could he come get her? The nurse's voice was calm but firm. Stefan's chest immediately constricted, his vision narrowed. His breath, which should have been flowing in long, controlled exhales into the blowpipe, became short, rapid, panicked gasps. He tried to maintain focus, tried to keep working, but his hands began to shake violently. The glass, responding to his chaotic breath, wobbled, thinned unevenly, and then collapsed inward, molten and ruined. Stefan dropped the blowpipe and fell to his knees among the scattered tools and broken glass from previous failed attempts. His heart hammered against his ribs like something trying to escape. He couldn't catch his breath, couldn't slow the racing thoughts, couldn't stop the feeling that he was dying right there on the workshop floor. This was his first full panic attack, though he didn't know to call it that. He only knew that breathing, the most automatic function of human existence, had suddenly become impossible. His body had forgotten how. And in that moment of gasping terror, a memory surfaced, faint but insistent, his grandfather's voice from decades ago. A glassblower who cannot control his breath cannot control anything at all. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare of sleeplessness, failed attempts, and mounting dread, the dwindling balance in his account. 5 days into the commission, Stefan had completed only one acceptable piece. 7 days remained, 11 pieces still needed. The math was impossible, but more impossible was the state of his mind and body. The panic attacks were coming more frequently now, triggered by phone calls, unexpected noises, Elena's questions, his own reflection in the workshop windows. Each attack left him shaking and exhausted, unable to work for hours afterward. His workshop floor became a graveyard of shattered glass, each broken piece representing not just wasted materials, but wasted time he didn't have. Elena noticed, of course. Children always notice. One morning, finding him staring blankly at his cold furnace, she asked, in her small, serious voice, "Papa, why are you always breathing so fast, like you've been running, but you're just standing still?" Stefan snapped at her, something sharp and dismissive, and immediately watched her face crumple. The guilt was instantaneous and crushing. He was becoming absent, irritable, unreachable. He was becoming the one thing he had sworn he would never be. Too broken to be there for his daughter. And that realization, more than anything else, nearly finished him. On the 8th night, Stefan didn't leave the workshop. He couldn't afford sleep, couldn't afford rest, couldn't afford anything except somehow completing enough pieces to salvage this disaster. He worked through the darkness, the furnace casting orange light across his haggard face, attempting piece after piece. But panic had taken up permanent residence in his body now. His breath was perpetually shallow, his hands perpetually unsteady, his mind perpetually screaming that he was failing, drowning, destroying everything. By the time weak dawn light filtered through the workshop windows, the floor was covered in broken glass, beautiful, useless shards that caught the light and reflected his failure back at him 1,000 times over. Only 2 pieces completed, 5 days remaining. It was over. He had lost. Stefan sat among the ruins of his work and his life, too exhausted even to cry. His mind, usually racing with anxiety, had gone strangely quiet in the way minds do when they finally accept defeat. And in that hollow silence, a memory rose, clear and complete. He was 10 years old, standing in his grandfather's workshop, watching the old man shape an impossible vase, paper-thin and perfect. Young Stefan had asked, "How do you make it look so easy, grandfather? Don't you ever worry about breaking it?" His grandfather had smiled, never taking his eyes off the glowing glass. "Worry is just breath wasted on fear, boy. The glass doesn't care about your worries. It only responds to your breath, steady hands, Steady mind, master your breath, and you master everything else. Forget your breath, and everything shatters. That's not poetry, Stefan. That's physics. The next morning, Elena found Stefan still sitting among the broken glass, staring at nothing. She had come looking for him with something clutched in her small hands, a book from her hospital therapy sessions. It was a children's workbook about managing chronic pain through breathing exercises. Elena sat down beside her father, unbothered by the glass around them, and opened the book to a page she had clearly looked at many times. The corners were worn, certain phrases highlighted in crayon. "Papa," she said gently, "when everything hurts really bad, my doctor taught me this trick. She said when your body is scared or hurting, it forgets how to breathe right. So you have to teach it again." Elena demonstrated, her small chest rising and falling with exaggerated deliberateness. "You breathe in for 4 counts like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you hold it for 4 counts. Then you breathe out for 4 counts. She says it tells your body that everything is okay, even when it feels like it's not. It makes the bad feelings smaller." Stefan watched his 9-year-old daughter breathe with perfect, practiced rhythm, and something cracked open inside him. Not something breaking, something unsealing. She had been dealing with pain and fear for 2 years, and somehow she had learned what he had forgotten. Or perhaps what he had known all along, but never understood. He had spent 20 years learning to breathe correctly for his craft. Long, controlled exhales to shape molten glass, steady rhythm to maintain even temperature, focused breath to create beauty from chaos. The technique was identical. He had been teaching himself the answer to overwhelm for 2 decades, but only in the context of his work. It had never occurred to him that the breath that shaped glass could also shape his mind, his fear, his spiraling thoughts. "Show me again, little one," Stefan whispered, and Elena, with the patience of someone far older than 9, taught her father how to breathe. That afternoon, Stefan returned to the furnace, but everything was different. Before lighting it, before gathering materials, before touching anything, he sat down and did exactly what Eleanor had shown him. 4 counts in through his nose, feeling his lungs expand fully for the first time in weeks. Hold for 4 counts, feeling his heart rate begin to slow. 4 counts out through his mouth, long and controlled, feeling the tension begin to drain from his shoulders. He did this 10 times, just breathing, while his mind screamed that he was wasting time, that he needed to work, that panic was the only appropriate response to his situation. But Stefan kept breathing, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. His heart rate decreased, his hands stopped trembling. The tunnel vision that had been his constant companion for weeks began to widen. The problems were still there, the deadline, the debt, the fear. All of it remained, but he felt, for the first time in months, like he could see them clearly instead of drowning in them. He stood, lit the furnace, and gathered molten glass on the blowpipe. Then he did something he had never done before. He consciously matched his work rhythm to a breathing pattern. 4 counts in as he rotated the pipe. 4 counts out as he blew into it, shaping the glass. The breath wasn't just something that happened while he worked, it became the structure of the work itself. And the glass responded. It flowed smoothly under his controlled exhale, forming beautifully, holding its shape. It wasn't perfect, and Stefan felt the old anxiety rising at the imperfection. But he paused, breathed 4 counts, and continued. Good enough was infinitely better than shattered. By evening, he had completed 1 piece. Just 1, but it was whole, it was beautiful, and he had done it without breaking down. That night, instead of working himself to exhaustion, Stefan stopped at a reasonable hour. He picked up Elena from his neighbor's house, made them both dinner, and before bed, they sat together and practiced breathing. 4 in, 4 out, father and daughter in rhythm. Elena fell asleep quickly, her breath deep and even. Stefan watched her for a long moment, then returned to his workshop, not in panic, but in purpose. The next 3 days became an experiment in presence. Every time Stefan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the racing thoughts, the trembling hands, he stopped. He didn't push through it or try to outwork it. He simply breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts out until his body remembered it was safe. Then he returned to the glass. The work came slower than he wanted, but it came steadily. 3 pieces completed, then 4, then 5, each one crafted not in panic, but in the calm created by deliberate breath. He began to notice something remarkable. When he was breathing consciously, his mind couldn't spiral. It was physiologically impossible to maintain controlled breathing and full panic simultaneously. One would always override the other. He just had to choose which one. On the 11th day, with 1 day remaining before the deadline, Stefan had completed 9 pieces. 3 remained, and they were the most technically complex of the entire commission. That morning, everything tried to fall apart one final time. A supplier called demanding immediate payment for overdue materials, or they would cease deliveries. Eleanor's doctor, his office called about a missed appointment and warned that continuing treatment required keeping to the schedule. The gallery called to confirm the next day's delivery time, noting that any delay would result in contract cancellation and forfeited payment. 3 phone calls in 15 minutes, each one a catastrophe. Stefan felt it all rising, the chest tightness, the shallow breathing, the tunnel vision, the shaking hands. This was the moment, the test of everything he had learned. Would he drown or would he breathe? His mind screamed at him to panic, to try solving everything at once, to spiral into the familiar chaos. But Stefan set down the phone, closed his eyes, and breathed. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out. He did this not once but 20 times, standing in the middle of his workshop while crisis hammered at the doors. And slowly, beneath the noise of catastrophe, he found stillness. When he opened his eyes, the problems were still there, but he was steady enough to face them one breath at a time. He called the supplier back and negotiated a 3-day extension with a partial payment. He rescheduled Elena's appointment for the day after the delivery. He confirmed the gallery pickup time. None of these were perfect solutions, but they were solutions. Then Stefan turned to his furnace with 4 hours before he needed to collect Elena from school. 1 piece. He just needed to focus on 1 piece, not 3, not the entire future, not every possible thing that could go wrong. 1 piece, 1 breath, 1 moment. He began the first of the 3 remaining sculptures, and something extraordinary happened. The breathing wasn't a technique anymore. It was integrated, automatic, natural. He breathed with the glass instead of fighting with his anxiety. Inhale as he gathered the molten material. Long, controlled exhale as he shaped it. The piece flowed into being, organic and beautiful. Stefan wasn't forcing it into perfection. He was guiding it with steady breath into its natural form. By the time he needed to leave for Elena's school, the piece was complete. It was perhaps the most beautiful thing he had made in years. That evening, Elena came to the workshop and sat quietly while Stefan worked on the second piece. The silence between them was comfortable, companionable. After a while, Stefan invited her to breathe with him as he worked. They inhaled together, held together, exhaled together. The glass responded to their unified rhythm, as if father and daughter were collaborating on creation itself. The piece took shape smoothly, surely, inevitably. When it was done, Elena smiled. "See, Papa? When you remember to breathe, everything works better." Stefan worked late into the night on the final piece. Not in desperation this time, but in flow. This sculpture was a phoenix rising from flames, the centerpiece of the collection, the most technically demanding. But Stefan found that when he matched his breath to the work, complexity became meditative rather than overwhelming. Each detail emerged not from forcing but from focused, controlled breath. He finished just before midnight, exhausted but calm. 12 pieces completed, not perfect, but whole, not flawless, but beautiful. Good enough to save everything. The next morning, Stefan carefully packed all 12 sculptures and delivered them to the gallery in the capital. The curator unpacked them slowly, her expression unreadable as she examined each piece. Stefan felt the old anxiety trying to rise, but breathed through it. Finally, she looked up, her eyes bright. "These are extraordinary, Stefan. There's something different about them. A quality I haven't seen in contemporary glasswork in years. They feel alive somehow, like they're still breathing." She paused, studying him. What changed? Stefan smiled for the first time in weeks. "I remembered how to breathe." The payment cleared that afternoon. Workshop rent secured for 6 months. Elena's treatment fully funded. The avalanche of disaster stopped. But Stefan knew the real change wasn't in his bank account. It was in his chest, in his hands, in the new understanding that the tool he needed to survive chaos had been with him all along. He just had to remember to use it. Weeks later, Stefan was teaching Eleanor the basics of glassblowing, letting her hold a small blowpipe and shape a simple ornament. She struggled with it, frustrated when the glass wouldn't cooperate, her breath coming in short, irritated puffs. The glass wobbled and began to collapse. Elena's face scrunched in concentration, and Stefan recognized the look. She was about to push harder, try to force it, let frustration override technique. "Little one," Stefan said gently, placing his hand over hers on the pipe. "When it feels like too much, what do we do?" Elena paused, looked at her father, and smiled. "We breathe. 4 counts." "That's right. Let's breathe together." Father and daughter breathed in unison, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, and the glass, responding to the steady rhythm, flowed smoothly into shape. Eleanor laughed with delight as the ornament formed perfectly under her small breath. Stefan watched her and understood that this was the real inheritance he would leave her. Not just the craft of glass blowing, but the wisdom beneath it. When life feels like it's too much, when the pressure builds and everything threatens to shatter, you don't need to do more. You need to breathe more. You need to breathe. Stefan learned what his grandfather had tried to teach him decades earlier, what Elena had shown him in his darkest moment, what his own craft had been demonstrating for 20 years. You cannot control the fire that heats the glass. You cannot control the speed at which glass cools or the 1,000 variables that influence each piece. You cannot control the chaos of life, the emergencies that arise, the pressures that build, the fears that multiply. You can only control one thing, your breath. And when you control your breath, you control your response to everything else. And your response is everything. Overwhelm isn't caused by having too much to do. It's caused by trying to do everything at once while your body is in panic mode, your breath shallow and rapid, your mind racing faster than thought. The solution isn't to eliminate stress or make life simpler or somehow do more. The solution is to breathe deliberately in the midst of chaos. 4 counts in, telling your body you are safe. Hold for 4 counts, creating a pause between stimulus and response. 4 counts out, releasing the tension and fear. It seems too simple to work, and that's precisely why most people never try it. We believe complex problems require complex solutions, but sometimes the most powerful tools are the simplest ones. Your body cannot remain in full panic when you're breathing slowly and deeply. It's physiologically impossible. The parasympathetic nervous system activated by controlled breathing literally overrides the stress response. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking, it's biology. The breath Stefan used to shape glass was the same breath that could reshape his mind. The technique was identical. He just had to choose to use it. Life will always bring the fire. That's not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be accepted. Your job isn't to extinguish the flames or avoid the heat. Your job is to breathe steadily in the presence of fire and shape something beautiful from it. The glass will shatter sometimes, projects will fail, emergencies will arise, pressure will build. That's the nature of being alive. But you have a choice in how you meet these moments. You can hold your breath, tense your body, race your thoughts, and guarantee that everything crumbles. Or you can pause, breathe, steady yourself, and respond with clarity instead of chaos. Stefan kept a small note in his workshop after that, visible from his workbench. It said simply, 4 in, 4 out. Breathe first, everything else second. On days when new crises arose, when Elena had bad health days, when commissions were difficult or money was tight, Stefan would read those words and remember. The breath comes first, not after you solve the problem, not once things calm down, not when life gets easier. Now, in the middle of the fire, that's when you breathe, that's when it matters most. What would change in your life if you simply remembered to breathe, not someday, when things are calmer, but right now in the middle of whatever overwhelm you're facing? 4 counts in through your nose, hold for 4 counts. 4 counts out through your mouth. Do it now. Do it 3 times. Notice how your shoulders drop slightly. Notice how your racing thoughts slow just a fraction. Notice how the impossible suddenly feels merely difficult. That's not magic. That's your body remembering what it knew all along. You are safe enough to take a full breath. And if you're safe enough to breathe, you're safe enough to take the next step. Just one step, one breath at a time. The glass is waiting. The work is waiting. Your life is waiting. Not for perfection, not for the perfect moment, not for all your anxiety to disappear. It's waiting for you to remember that you already have everything you need to navigate the fire. You just need to breathe through it. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The rest will follow. It always does.